There is a moment in combat when a soldier makes a decision. It happens in a fraction of a second, under fire, with adrenaline overriding reason. And for generations, that decision, get out of the vehicle, run for cover, move to the tree line, was the right one. It was doctrine. It was survival instinct backed by decades of battlefield experience. But something has changed on the fields of eastern Ukraine, and what has changed will force every military strategist, every defense planner, and every soldier who ever trained to survive contact with the enemy to rethink everything they were taught. Because on April 21st, 2026, near the sectors of Lyman and Zaporizhia, the old rules didn't just fail, they became a death sentence. I've spent decades studying warfare. I've commanded operations in some of the most dangerous environments on Earth, and I will tell you this plainly. What is unfolding in Ukraine right now is not an evolution of warfare. It is a revolution. And if you think this only matters to the soldiers on that ground, you are not paying close enough attention, because the lessons being written in blood on that battlefield will define how every future conflict is fought. Stay with me, because what comes next will challenge everything you think you know about survival, strategy, and the nature of modern war. Let me take you to that truck. A column of Russian troops moving through contested ground. The vehicle takes a hit. An FPV drone, fast and precise, aimed not to destroy completely, but to disable, to force a reaction. And it works. The soldiers do what every trained instinct tells them to do. They exit the vehicle. They move. They run. And the moment they step into the open, they don't find safety. They find the second drone, then the third, each one already in the air, each one already watching. The escape route was never an escape route. It was the next phase of the engagement. And that changes everything. This is what I need you to understand. What we are witnessing is not a weapon. It is a system. And there is a profound difference between the two. A weapon delivers a strike and withdraws. A system detects, disrupts, pursues, and finishes. It does not reset after the first contact. It does not give the target time to regroup, reassess, or recover. It operates in stages, each one designed to push the enemy further into vulnerability. The first drone forces the decision to abandon protection. The second drone punishes that decision. The third tracks whatever moves next. And behind all of it, reconnaissance units feed real-time information that turns every individual soldier sprinting across open ground into a separate, trackable target. I want you to think about what that means at the level of the individual. You've just survived a direct hit on your vehicle. Your ears are ringing. Your teammates are shouting. Your brain is running on pure instinct. You make the only decision that makes sense in that moment. You move. You run. And in doing so, you become exactly what the system needs you to become: exposed, isolated, predictable. Because fear, pressure, and chaos all produce the same thing: movement patterns. And movement patterns from above are not chaos. They are targets. This is one of the most important leadership lessons the battlefield has ever produced. And it comes not from a general's memoir, but from drone footage recorded in the spring of 2026. Under extreme pressure, people become predictable. It is not a failure of courage. It is a function of the human nervous system. The brain under threat narrows its options. It seeks the fastest route to perceived safety. And when a system is designed to exploit exactly that narrowing, when it is built around the assumption of predictable human behavior under fire, then training, discipline, and preparation are not just advantages. They are the only variables that can break the pattern. But what comes next will challenge everything you think you know about where safety ends and danger begins. Because the story of that truck and those soldiers is only the beginning of what's happening in eastern Ukraine. The real shift, the one that keeps defense analysts awake at night, is not just how these drones strike. It is what they are choosing to strike. And that choice reveals a level of strategic thinking that demands respect, regardless of which side of the conflict you analyze. In the sectors around Lyman and Zaporizhia, FPV drone units are no longer focusing exclusively on soldiers and armored vehicles. They are going after something smaller, something that doesn't photograph as dramatically, something that, when you hear about it individually, sounds almost minor. They are hitting communication antennas mounted in trees. They are destroying temporary shelters. They are striking abandoned trucks that might be reused later. They are targeting foxholes, supply caches, and small buildings used as short-term cover or observation posts. None of these are headline targets. But together, they form something that every commander understands and every logistician fears: the soft infrastructure of frontline warfare. I served in environments where we didn't always have the assets to go after the enemy's main battle tanks. But we understood something fundamental. If you disrupt the enemy's ability to communicate, rest, resupply, and coordinate, you don't need to destroy every vehicle. You erode the system that keeps those vehicles operational. You don't defeat an army by killing every soldier. You defeat it by taking away the conditions that allow soldiers to function as a unit. And that is precisely what is happening in Ukraine right now, at low cost, with small platforms that cost less than $1,000 apiece. A communication antenna is not just a piece of hardware. It is the voice between a unit commander and his headquarters. Remove it, and that commander is operating blind, making decisions without context, unable to call for support or pass intelligence up the chain. A shelter near the front is not just a place to sleep. It is the margin between a soldier who can still think clearly after 48 hours and one who cannot. Remove it, and you don't just eliminate comfort, you eliminate cognitive capacity at the exact moment it is most needed. A supply cache is not just ammunition and rations, it is operational endurance. Destroy it, and the unit's decision-making begins to be governed by scarcity rather than strategy. Each of these strikes, taken alone, looks manageable. Taken together, over days and weeks, they produce something that no single explosive could achieve: a systematic degradation of the enemy's ability to function, not just to fight, but to think, to coordinate, to adapt. And in modern warfare, the side that loses the ability to adapt loses the conflict, regardless of how much equipment it has in the rear. And if you think this level of precision is difficult to sustain, you are not ready for what's coming, because this system does not stop when the sun goes down. One of the foundational assumptions of frontline warfare, one that has shaped tactical doctrine for over a century, is that darkness provides cover. Night movement has always been a tool of survival. When visibility drops, aircraft become less effective, observation posts lose resolution, and the fighting man gains a window of relative safety to reposition, resupply, and recover. That assumption is now functionally dead in eastern Ukraine, and the implications of that are staggering. Reports and footage from April 2026 show Ukrainian drone units operating continuously through the night across key sectors near Lyman. Vehicles moving after sunset are being detected and struck. Individual soldiers attempting to reposition in darkness are being tracked across open ground, not by searchlights, not by flares, by thermal imaging systems that do not need light because they do not look for light. They look for heat, and heat does not disappear when the sun sets. A vehicle engine is a beacon. A running soldier is a signature. A recently occupied shelter, still warm from the bodies that sheltered in it, is a marker as clear as a lit window in a dark field. The combination of persistent UAV presence and thermal capability has effectively eliminated the concept of a safe hour. And I want you to understand what that means at the human level, not just the tactical level, because this is where the weight of this shift becomes most profound. When a soldier cannot rely on darkness as protection, the psychological clock that governs endurance changes fundamentally. Rest cycles are disrupted. The mind does not get the relief it needs. Reaction times slow. Awareness narrows. And small errors begin to accumulate. Choosing the wrong route, pausing 1 second too long in an exposed position, losing focus during a critical coordination window. Each one of these, in an environment where a drone may already be watching, can be fatal. Leadership means understanding this. It means recognizing that your people are not just fighting the enemy across the line. They are fighting the accumulated weight of an environment designed to deny them every margin. And when every margin is gone, when darkness is not safe, when cover is not permanent, when movement itself is risk, then the only thing left is discipline. Discipline in decision-making, discipline in maintaining formation, discipline in refusing to become predictable even when instinct screams for the fastest route out. I have stood in front of young men and women preparing for operations in environments where the odds were stacked against them. I have told them that the mission is not to avoid fear. The mission is to act with precision in spite of it. What is happening in Ukraine is a live demonstration of that principle at industrial scale. The side that can maintain discipline under this kind of sustained, omnipresent pressure, the kind that does not pause at night, does not reset after a strike, and does not allow recovery, that side holds the advantage. Not because of technology alone, because of what technology demands of the humans who face it. And what demands come next will reach even deeper into the structure of the battlefield itself. There is a tactic emerging from the footage of April 2026 that I want you to sit with for a moment. Not because it is the most dramatic development in this conflict, but because it is, in many ways, the most psychologically sophisticated. Ukrainian FPV units have begun landing their drones near routes, supply paths, and likely entry points, and then waiting. Not attacking immediately, not pursuing a moving target, simply waiting. Positioned, silent, already in place before the target ever arrives. Think about what that means for the soldier on the ground. You are not just managing the threat that is currently in the air, you are managing the possibility that the threat is already on the ground, already watching, already in position along the very route you are about to take. The road that has been quiet for 3 hours may not be clear. It may be prepared. The path leading to your shelter may already be covered. The supply corridor that your unit has used successfully a dozen times may already have a system waiting at the end of it. And there is no sound to warn you, no visual approach, no rising engine note from an incoming aircraft, just silence, and then impact. This is not a new principle of warfare. Ambush is as old as combat itself. But the application of ambush logic to aerial systems, the idea that a drone is not just a strike platform, but a patient waiting trap, represents a fundamental expansion of the threat envelope. Because ambush historically requires personnel. It requires bodies in position, held still, under discipline for hours. It carries risk for the ambushers as well as the ambushed. A drone waiting on the ground near a route carries none of that human cost. It simply waits. And it waits without fatigue, without distraction, without the psychological pressure that makes human ambush teams difficult to sustain over extended periods. The cost of patience in this model is essentially zero. What this does to operational planning is severe. Every decision about movement must now account not just for what is visible above, but for what may already be in place below. This forces slower movement, shorter intervals between cover positions, and a level of caution that directly reduces operational tempo. A unit that once covered a given distance in 30 minutes may now require twice that time to do so safely. Supply runs become longer, repositioning windows shrink, and the cumulative effect on the rhythm of frontline operations is a steady erosion of agility, the very quality that defines effective tactical response. But if you think the ambush drone is the final layer of this system, you are not yet seeing the full picture. Because in regions like Zaporizhia, a targeting priority has emerged that strikes at the very nerve center of drone warfare itself. UAV crews and their operating shelters are now being hunted with the same deliberate focus that was once reserved for armored vehicles and command posts. And this reveals a level of strategic thinking that goes beyond the immediate battlefield. It reflects an understanding that in modern warfare, the operator is as critical as the weapon. Destroy the drone, and it can be replaced. Destroy the crew that guides it, and you have removed something far more difficult to reconstitute quickly: trained human judgment operating inside a complex system. A UAV crew is not simply a group of people holding controllers. They are the eyes that maintain awareness over a sector. They are the decision makers who determine when to strike and when to hold. They are the coordinators who feed information into a wider network, connecting what one drone sees to what another drone does. When a crew is eliminated, the coverage gap that results does not close immediately. It takes time to move another team into position, reestablish communications, and restore the situational awareness that was lost. And during that gap, the opposing side has a window, brief but real, to move, to reposition, to act without the constant overhead presence that defines the modern front line. This is the logic of targeting the node rather than the edge. In any network system, the most effective attack is not the one that removes the most visible element. It is the one that removes the element that holds other elements together. A UAV crew is exactly that kind of node. Remove it, and the network does not simply lose one operator, it loses the coherence that operator provided across an entire sector. This is systems thinking applied to warfare, and it represents a maturity of approach that should command serious attention from every defense institution in the world. I spent a significant portion of my career thinking about networks, how they operate, how they fail, and how to either protect them or dismantle them, depending on which side of the mission I was on. The principle is consistent regardless of context. Networks are resilient against attacks on their periphery, but they are vulnerable at their connective points, the nodes that enable communication, coordination, and shared awareness. In eastern Ukraine in 2026, drone crews have become those nodes, and the decision to target them reflects a strategic understanding that the war is not just about destroying equipment. It is about dismantling the system that makes equipment effective. And what this means for the broader trajectory of the conflict is something that every analyst should be studying carefully. Because taken together, the sequential strike system, the destruction of soft infrastructure, the elimination of night as a safe window, the ambush drone waiting at the route, and the targeting of UAV crews, what you have is not a collection of tactics. What you have is a doctrine, a coherent, integrated approach to warfare that treats the battlefield not as a series of individual engagements, but as a living system to be degraded across every layer simultaneously. Physical capability, logistical endurance, communication, cognitive function, psychological resilience. Each layer is under pressure. Each layer is being stripped away with deliberate, sustained effort. And behind all of it is an economic logic that is as powerful as any military principle I have encountered. An FPV drone costs somewhere between a few hundred and $1,000. The armored vehicle it destroys costs hundreds of thousands. The trained crew it eliminates took years and significant resources to develop. The communication infrastructure it strikes took time and expertise to establish. The ratio between what is expended and what is destroyed is not just favorable, it is strategically transformative. Because in a prolonged conflict, sustainability is not a support function. It is a weapon. The side that can maintain its tools, replace its losses, and continue operations at scale will outlast the side that cannot, regardless of which side began with more. Ukraine has demonstrated the capacity to produce and acquire FPV drones in numbers that allow this kind of continuous operational pressure. Russia's ability to replace lost armored vehicles, retrain experienced crews, and rebuild damaged infrastructure operates on a fundamentally different timeline. That asymmetry, cheap, fast, scalable tools on one side against expensive, slow-to-replace assets on the other, is not just a tactical advantage. Over time, it becomes a strategic one. And strategy, as every serious military thinker understands, is where wars are ultimately decided. I want to bring this back to the human dimension, because that is where it ultimately matters most. Every soldier who has ever served understands what it means to operate under sustained pressure. Physical exhaustion is manageable when the mind remains clear. Dangerous terrain is navigable when the unit remains cohesive. Even fear can be controlled when training and discipline provide a framework for action. But what the system unfolding in eastern Ukraine is designed to do, at its deepest level, is remove every one of those anchors. It removes the physical ability to rest by making darkness as dangerous as daylight. It removes logistical confidence by destroying the supplies and shelters that sustain frontline function. It removes communication by targeting the antennas and crews that keep units connected. And it removes the psychological anchor of predictable threat by introducing ambush systems that may already be waiting before the first move is made. What is left, when all of those anchors are gone, is an individual operating on raw instinct in an environment designed to exploit instinct. And raw instinct, as I have said, produces predictable patterns. Predictable patterns in this environment produce casualties. This is not cruelty for its own sake. This is precision application of pressure at every layer of human function simultaneously, and it is profoundly effective. The lesson for every military institution, every defense planner, and every leader who takes the future of warfare seriously is this: the next conflict will not be decided exclusively by who has the heaviest armor or the longest range artillery. It will be decided by who has built systems, not just weapons, that can sustain pressure across multiple layers at low cost over extended time. Who has trained their people to maintain discipline and decision-making quality in environments where every traditional margin of safety has been removed? Who has developed the doctrine to treat the battlefield as an interconnected ecosystem rather than a series of isolated engagements? And who has the intellectual honesty to look at what is happening in Ukraine right now in real time, in recorded footage, in documented operational outcomes, and draw the correct conclusions before those lessons need to be learned under fire? I have made my bed in the morning in conditions where doing so felt like the most trivial act imaginable given everything else at stake, but I did it because discipline begins with the small things. Because the habits of precision and accountability that you build in the mundane moments are the same habits that carry you through the impossible ones. The soldiers on the front lines of eastern Ukraine did not choose to face a battlefield where darkness offers no cover and movement invites ambush, but they face it nonetheless. And the ones who survive, not just physically, but operationally, as a functioning unit, will be the ones whose training build habits resilient enough to function even when every familiar anchor has been stripped away. That is the lesson of Ukraine in 2026. Not the cost of a drone versus the cost of a tank, though that matters enormously. Not the technical specifications of a thermal imaging system, though that matters too. The deepest lesson is this: warfare has entered a phase where the system defeats the individual. And the only answer to a system is a system. Doctrine, training, cohesion, communication discipline, the ability to function under sustained, omnipresent pressure without becoming predictable. These are not soft capabilities. They are the hardest capabilities to build, the slowest to develop, and the most decisive when the moment comes. What is happening in eastern Ukraine will not stay in eastern Ukraine. The tactics being refined on those fields, tested in real conditions against real resistance, iterated in real time based on real outcomes, will spread. They will be studied, adapted, and applied in future conflicts in ways we cannot yet fully anticipate. Every military that is not watching closely, not drawing conclusions, and not building the doctrine to respond is falling behind on a timeline that will not wait for them to catch up. The question is not whether this changes warfare. It already has. The question is whether the institutions responsible for preparing the next generation of warfighters are moving with the speed and intellectual seriousness that this moment demands. Whether the lessons visible in this footage, in these strikes, in these outcomes, in the systematic dismantling of a frontline force layer by layer, are being absorbed not as curiosities, but as directives for change. I've spent my life in service to the idea that preparation is the greatest form of respect you can show to the people you are responsible for leading. You prepare them honestly, rigorously, and without the comfort of false assumptions. You do not tell them the battlefield will be fair. You tell them the truth, give them the tools to meet it, and trust that the discipline you built together will hold when everything else gives way. The battlefield in eastern Ukraine is telling us the truth right now. The only question that remains is whether we are listening.